Mrs. Baker's eyebrows are on fleek. Hashtag jealous. What does that even mean?
Are we sure that Mrs. Ritt is really drinking water in that big bottle of hers? What teacher do you know in America that could afford to drink more than half a gallon of water every day? And honestly, guys, I am not a drinker, but questions like this make me wonder why I don't become one. Like, really? That's real.
If someone's office is that clean, are they really doing any work? Hashtag Mrs. Sefcik does all the work.
If Mrs. Sefcik isn't happy, nobody is happy. Hashtag she's always right. That's not a mean tweet, that's the truth.
Every time Mr. Brown tells a fart joke, I die a little inside.
Mr. Durso is very picky when he grades his essays. I wish he were that picky about the sweaters he wore. I like my sweater.
Miss Pearson is so obsessed with her kids. Hashtag uber obsessed. I kinda am.
Forensics, my favorite class when we watch Bones, but my least favorite when she actually makes you do work. Hashtag Team Booth. Tell me you don't like watching Booth.
Every time Mrs. Crusoe yells at me, I can't help but laugh because that woman doesn't have a single mean bone in her body. What? I can yell? Get in your seats, do your homework. Is that better?
Mr. Nee's secret profession would be acting. He acts like he likes us, and he acts like he's funny. First and foremost, I am funny, and none of you respects good humor anymore.
Don't tell Drusy, but we signed her up for Chapstick Anonymous. Hashtag intervention?
It really hurt my eyes to watch Mrs. Marzano try to dance during that assembly. Hashtag scarred for life. Hashtag learn to twerk. I can dance. Well, maybe I can't dance, but you'll never see me twerk. That's just nasty.
I don't know what to call Mrs. Cook. Mrs. Wilkinson. Ugh, I've made Gallic anymore. Hashtag stop changing your last name. I am done, but as Mr. Rabatin says, everyone should do it twice.
Wow, someone actually thinks Mr. Durso is funny. Doesn't everyone?
Mrs. Jeffries, have you heard about the new study? There are calories in air. Hashtag you're gonna get fat. I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure Mr. Miller owns more scarves than I do.
Batten even retweets on his phone. Pound sign stuck in the Stone Age. Pound sign, what's this pound sign? What's pound sign mean? What's this pound sign mean? Stuck in the Stone Age, what's that mean?
I really question Mrs. Gartley's judgment. I didn't even start working on my clay chunk yet, and Mrs. Gartley said my bowl was a masterpiece. Hashtag stop lying. Yeah, it wasn't really a masterpiece.
Who's having a baby? Mr. Papp or his wife? Hashtag Mr. Papp's belly.
Mrs. Hager makes me feel like a failure as a woman. Hashtag on that wifey status. Yeah.
Mr. Gullich's Sasquatch call is the funniest thing I ever heard. Hashtag Squatch. There shall always be skeptics.
Mrs. Hoke is a ball of energy on Thursdays because she drinks all of the leftover coffee from the coffee shop. Hashtag talk about coffee breath. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Last time Miss Fortuna took a breath was 1984. Hashtag. Okay. That belt is tight. Go to the Bucks. Hashtag.
If Miss Carbonara had a daughter, she would name her Sabiga. Hashtag she's obsessed. Is that a bad thing?
Does Mrs. Sharanek even have a classroom? She's always in the library. Hashtag bookworms. We're not always in the library.
Honestly, Mrs. Cribble, you honestly say honestly way too much. Like honestly. Hashtag honestly. Honestly?
I thought Mrs. Thomas was a student for the past 3 years. Hashtag I was wrong. Look, I know I'm shorter than all the freshmen, okay?
Tone it down, Mrs. Loudon. Hashtag I need hearing aids? Do I really talk that loud?
Yes.
Mr. Davis looks like Tom Hanks in Castaway. Hashtag beard for days. I don't get it.
Mrs. Ritt, you're dumber than a rock. You're Y-O-U-R, dumber, D-U-M-E-R, then T-H-E-N. Try harder. This is too easy.
I wonder how many donuts Mr. Kaufman can eat in one setting. Mr. Lyon.
I heard Miss Marcinek is getting married in Mexico this summer. I'm still waiting on my invitation. Hashtag guest of honor. No.
Mrs. Cirillo is a high school band nerd 10 years later? Oh well, at least they made me a few years younger.
Freshmen, raise your hand if you've ever felt personally victimized by Miss Carbonara. Hashtag mean girls. I'm so not mean. I love my students.
I heard Mr. Scott spray tans. Are you kidding me? Look at my legs.
Hey, you, come here.
Hey, you, come here.
Didn't I tell you to get in my office?
Didn't I tell you to get in my office?
Can't you hear me? You get in that office.
Can't you hear me? You get in that office.